Hello, hello, hello you guys, and welcome back to my kitchen. And today I'm making stewed tomatoes out of all of my cherry tomatoes here. Oops, bumped the camera you guys. Alright, what I have here is 3 1-gallon bags and 1 3/4 of a gallon bag. So what I'm going to do is when I harvest my tomatoes, I pick them right off the vine, stick them right into my freezer, and freeze them as is. It keeps them fresher, and in my opinion makes this next step so much easier. So all I'm going to do is let these partially defrost, and then I cut them in half and throw them in my stew pot. A lot of people like to skin their tomatoes, which is completely your choice. We don't mind tomato skins in our stewed tomatoes. That's why we don't mind using the little cherry tomatoes, because they work out perfect for stew. Just cut the tomato in half, throw it in the pot, and then cook it and stewed tomato. Yeah! So that's what we're going to do. We're going to let these sit here, let these start to defrost, and then we'll just cut them in half, throw them in the stew pot, and start the process. And I'll be bringing you back for that whole thing. Alright guys, we'll be back. Then all we do is, now that they've started to defrost, if it's a bigger tomato, cut it into small pieces. If it's a small, tiny cherry tomato, just cut it in half. And that's all we do. Go through and cut up all the tomatoes and throw them in the big pot, and that's it. Well, that's it for this step. You just cut them up. We'll be back for the next step. I've got 3.5 gallons of tomatoes to slice up. We'll be back, you guys. And there we have it, you guys. All 3.5 gallons of those tomatoes are sliced and in my big stock pot. Now, to prevent it from burning on the bottom, I always like to add 1.5 cups of water, just so that it doesn't burn on the bottom, because the tomatoes are still mostly frozen and you don't want them to scorch. Then I turn it on low. You always want to cook any of this tomato stuff on low. These are tomato product. They're high acid. They come to a boil quickly and burn very easily. So there we have it. 1.5 cups water into my stock pot on low. I'm going to put the lid on it and, you know, get it about halfway through the cooking process, and I'll bring you back and show you what to do next, or what I do next. Alright guys, there we have it. It has been cooking down slowly for about 2.5 hours. It's not quote-unquote boiling, because like I said, I've got it on low. This is a tomato product, we don't want to burn it. Alright, now my stewed tomato recipe, the recipe itself would be considered rogue canning, because it comes out of this book, Canning and Preserving for Dummies. Yep, it's one of those actual for dummy books. I do highly recommend this book. This is a great book. The front of it walks you through all kinds of, here, and those are the index, all kinds of tips, tricks, information you should know before you get started, all that. This is an amazing book. Anyways, in here is a recipe for stewed tomatoes. Now, I always triple the recipe, and we don't use celery because we prefer not to use celery. And I also add apple cider vinegar the lemon juice, and instead of granulated sugar, I like to use honey. So, okay, it calls for 5 to 6 pounds of peeled tomatoes and 4 quarts chopped cord and the liquid part of the tomato. Now, since I use cherry tomatoes, I use, 15 pounds, 20 pounds of cherry tomatoes, and as you can tell, as compared to what they look like earlier, they have cooked down quite a bit. Oh, yum, I can't wait. It smells so wonderful. Okay, it calls for celery, but like I said, we don't like celery. And then it calls for half of a medium onion chopped. So since this is a tripled recipe, it would call for an onion and a half. And we like onions, but we prefer the peppers in our stewed tomatoes. So instead, I only do 1 onion, and yes, I use Thrive Life. So that's half a cup, 1 onion. I'd do 1.5 cups if I were gonna actually do what they call for in here. Then it calls for 1/4 of a bell pepper. But again, like I said, I've changed the recipe slightly. We enjoy more. So if this is a triple recipe, it would call for 3/4 of a green bell pepper. But again, like I said, we like to have lots of bell pepper. So I do the equivalent of 1 bell pepper, which is half a cup. And then we always do another half bell pepper, which is 1/4 cup. Next part calls for sugar, and it calls for 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar to all of to what the recipe calls for. I will include a picture of the exact recipe to make sure that you guys can see it, but like I said, I've changed it slightly. Okay, it calls for 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar, but I like to add a good 1/4 cup of honey. Then, and I do the lemon juice and the apple cider vinegar for my own comfort, because since we have peppers and onions in here, this is now a low acid recipe. So I like to add a little bit of acids back in, and I will still be pressure canning it like the recipe calls for, because even though I've added acids, apple cider vinegar, and lemon juice back into this, I still, as a canner, feel more comfortable pressure canning it. Okay. And those peppers and onions will help absorb some of the liquid, not a ton. Alright, then I add half cup lemon juice, because we really like lemon in our stewed tomatoes. Then I add 1/4 cup apple cider vinegar. Now, you don't have to add those because the recipe does not call for lemon juice or apple cider vinegar. But again, like I was saying, as a canner, I feel more comfortable with this being low acid, adding that lemon juice and apple cider vinegar. It does, oh, that smells so good, slightly change the flavor, of course, because you're adding vinegar and lemon juice. However, we don't mind that flavor change. We don't mind the cider vinegar in our stewed tomatoes. That smells so good. Now we add our salt. So that single recipe would have called for 2 teaspoons, but remember, we tripled it. So that would be 3 teaspoons or a tablespoon. I can't find my tablespoon. There you go. And I like to add applewood smoked sea salt. We love the flavor and we love what it does to recipes. Now, since everything is added to it, I will turn the heat up very slightly and turn it up to a medium low, just to bring this up to a little bit more of a gentle boil to get those peppers and onions rehydrated, and then we'll start the canning process. Well, putting it in the jars for the canning process. Alright guys, we'll be back. There we go, you guys. It's been on a very slow boil. I just stirred it, so at the moment you can't see the bubbles from the boiling, but it's on a very, very, very low boil. The peppers are mostly rehydrated. The onions are rehydrated. Peppers will finish rehydrating when they go through the canner. Trust me. So all I'm going to do is turn this off and let it sit for a few minutes while I bake my jars and get everything ready. We'll be back, you guys. Alright, we've got my jars. I washed them and baked and sterilized them in a 215 degree oven for 20 minutes. And then all we do is ladle our warm stewed tomatoes in. To the bottom rim or an inch from the top. And move on to the next one. Make sure you stir it before you start working on grabbing the next amount, so that you get yourself an even amount of juice and tomatoes, and you don't end up with just juice or just tomatoes. So yeah, let's get this done. I'm gonna fill up all these jars. I have a feeling I'm also gonna have to do some 1.5 jars. So I need to get those in the oven. Alright guys, we're going to get this all filled up and I'll bring you back for the next step. And there we have it, you guys. I got 6 quarts, 4 1.5, and 2 pints. So, this is apple cider vinegar with warm water. And I clean the rim and the threads. Boom. And I'm just going to do that to all the rest of these. That was a little messy when I put my Alright guys, I'm gonna finish putting the lids on these and get my canner ready and bring you back when we're all ready to go. And there we have it. I have 6 quarts and one of the small pints, and we're going to do it according to the quart size, and that is pressure can for 20 minutes for quarts, 15 if it's just pints that I'm doing, but I'm doing quarts, so we're going to do it for 20 minutes. And you want to make sure that you do the weight according to your elevation. Because of where I'm at, I need 10 pounds of pressure. But all we do to start out with is put our lid on. You always want to check to make sure that, I had done that before I turned on the camera. Here. Check to make sure your weight works. Check to make sure you're clear. Line up the arrows. Oh, come on. Really? What did I do? Oh. I've never done that before. Line up the arrows. You'll hear air push through as you're sealing it and closing it because it starts to create pressure immediately. And you just turn it on. Now I always like to turn it on medium. It does take a little longer to get up to pressure. But for me, I feel more safe with a more stabilized and controlled canning process if I leave it on medium the whole time. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but some people turn it up to high, and then when it starts to go, then they turn it down to medium and let it for my own head, I mean, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a perfectly valid way to can. I'm just a overly cautious nutbag. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm an overly cautious nutbag. It says 20 minutes, but I've said it in other videos. I always add 5 minutes to my pressure canning time, always, because, again, I'm an overly cautious nutbag. It's what I do. Same thing with baking my jars. You only have to bake them on 215 degrees for 5 minutes. I do it for 15 because I'm an overly cautious nutbag. It's just what I do. I mean, yes, it's considered rogue canning, and yes, I do rogue canning, but I'm overly cautious when I do it because this is my family's health. And your family's health if you do this. Alright, so I got it turned on. We're going to let it come up to a full vent. And then we'll put our pressure on, or our weight on. And then let it come up to processing, and then we'll process it. You only have to do it for 20 minutes. Like I said, I always add 5. So 20 minutes for quarts, 15 for pints. We'll let this come up to temperature and processing, and we'll be back. Ooh, I like this camera. You can see the full vent on the camera. You see that, guys? That's a full vent. Oh, now it's missing. Well, you could see it on the camera for a minute. There it is. All depends upon the angle. Anyways, that's the full vent. We just put the weight on it. Wait till it comes up to a jiggle. And then we start the timer. And you want to make sure that it vents a full vent for 10 minutes before you put the weight on. Alright guys, we'll be back. That is processing. That nice, steady. We set our timer and we process for 20 minutes. I set mine for 25. You can set it for the 20 or the 25. Like I said before, I'm an over-cautious nutbag. Alright, we'll be back, you guys. Alright, we've been processing for 25 minutes, so all we're going to do is turn it off. We're not going to touch it. We're not going to mess with it. We're not going to move it. We're not going to try to force it to cool down. We're going to let it sit until the knob pops down. And as you can see, it's already starting to calm down. We don't want to mess or jiggle or touch or bang. We just want to walk away from it and let it be. Alright guys, we'll be back. Alright, here we go. The button popped down. We jiggle it, there's no more pressure released. So what I do is, that's hot. I just turn it and set it, just like that, for about 5 minutes. And then we'll come back to it. Alright guys, it's been 5 minutes. We're going to pull this open. These popped all of them popped when that lid was still sitting on them for 5 minutes. I'm just gonna pull it out and move it over to the cooling rack. Ooh. Okay, maybe one of them hadn't popped. Oh, this is so beautiful. Now, whenever you do stewed tomatoes, the liquid and the tomatoes separate. When this cools down to not completely cool, but touchable, you just pick the jar up and shake it about, and it'll disperse all the tomatoes evenly throughout the jar, and then they'll stay settled like that on your shelf for as long as you have them. Alright guys, I'm going to let these sit and I'll bring you back when it's time to shake them all up. Alright guys, Alright guys, it's been about 2 hours. They're still warm, but they're cool enough to the touch to pick up. All you do, there we go. And they will now, instead of being separated, they'll now all be together and it'll stay like that from now on. And you won't have the separation. Now, I know I'm going to get asked this. I know people are going to say, how come your tomatoes aren't bright red? How come your sauce isn't bright red? Hey guys, remember, only half the cherry tomatoes I used were red. The other half of the cherry tomatoes were the yellow pear ones or those purple ones. So, alright, I have my other jars in the canner at the moment canning. So I'm just going to say now, thank you for coming along on this video. I hope it helped you learn how I make stewed tomatoes. I also highly recommend getting this book, Canning and Preserving for Dummies. I love this book. It is a great book. I believe the recipes in them are even ball canning book recipes, so that you know they're safe recipes to go ahead and try. I know at the beginning of the video I said mine is row canning. It is, because I have slightly changed the recipe for it. And speaking of, I'll get you a photo of it so that you have a full photo of the recipe. What I changed is I don't use celery, and instead of using fresh onions and peppers, I use Thrive Life, and instead of granulated sugar, I used honey. Alright guys, thanks for coming along on this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave me a thumbs up and leave a comment down below letting me know if there's anything else you'd like to see me do. Share this on all your social media. It helps my channel grow and helps me be able to do more and get more out to everyone. Alright guys, thanks for coming along, and we'll see you in the next one. And remember everyone, stay positive. Canning really is not that hard. Bye!